So I've been having quite the nostalgic back and forth over Twitter over the past few days, and I've pretty much just said, "Look, this is my last response." Blah 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 blah, and then I muted the conversation. I'm done because we're just kind of going in circles, and because of our completely different perspectives, we cannot understand each other. This person cannot compute what I am saying, just like I cannot what he's saying, right? It was an argument about religion, about specifically the existence of God, right? Now, you'll find a lot of these people on Twitter, and just before we go into this, I am nowhere near as anti-religion as I used to be, right? Have your belief. It's fine. I don't really care. Up until a point where you use it to justify something that is morally reprehensible, or just not very nice, or your own actions or something. When you use faith to justify something, that's typically when I have a problem with it. Like controlling people or so on and so forth. Anyway, but I don't really have that much of an issue with religion. I don't like it. I don't understand it. I do find a lot of religious folk to be kind of creepy in the way they talk. It's almost kind of like, that specific kind of religious person that's very, very spacey in how they talk, and they sound like they're not there, like they're really high on something. I find that creepy. That triggers that part of my brain that says, run, back away and leave. This person is dangerous. Even if they're not. That's just what I hear with that crap, right? But anyway, this conversation essentially boils down to, I'd say, 3-4 separate things. So the big one, which I think is the most funny, is literally the God of the Gaps. This person argues that because science cannot explain how this all started, then it must be God. Literally the God of the Gaps. And it's funny because the God of the Gaps has been a tactic that has been used for years and has been less and less effective as time has gone on because, well, there's more things we understand now than we do like 50 odd years ago. So the gaps that God can be squeezed into as an explanation get fewer and fewer. But this one is a good one because we're probably never going to find out how the fuck all this started. Because quite frankly, as soon as you start to get into astronomy and like black holes and universes and just the whole concept of space, just... This is the thing, like, space cannot go on forever, but it also cannot stop. The moment you start thinking about this, you realize our entire concept of what reality is fucked. Like, our minds just completely break apart. This is Lovecraftian level bullshit in our own reality. Because the average human brain cannot comprehend space. I can't. There's a decent chance you watching this can't as well. Because it just keeps going on. Like, but it can't. A thing cannot keep going on forever, but it can't just stop because then what's beyond it? It's maddening. It's confusing. It makes no sense. So some people, in this giant gap in our understanding and our ability to comprehend, say, that's the proof that God exists. Why God, no, though? Why not Cthulhu? Why not a giant turtle or a big happy gas ball? Like, why specifically God? Specifically your version of God, by the way. None of the billions upon trillions of deities that humankind have created and merged into one another due to conquest and whatnot over the years. And the countless many that have been forgotten to time. Like, none of them, specifically your one. It's just like, my response to this is the only honest one. I don't know. I think the idea of putting God in that space is just cope. It's just cope. It's desperation. But that is what faith is. Like, take faith as what it is in general, not just the religious context, but faith. What is faith? Faith is hope and trust in something that you have no proof in, right? Like, you may have experience that have bolstered it a little bit, but ultimately having faith in something is believing in that thing. It's like, this is going to work out how I believe it will work out. Doesn't matter, like, I have nothing really to stand on. I just believe that this is how it's going to be. Anything that is truly real does not need faith, right? You do not need faith for that. If it is truly real and is proven, you do not need faith. Faith is only for things that cannot be proven, it's not a solid foundation, right? So say that God is real, right? God is real, shows up, talks to people, we can see what it looks like, and I'm going to use the word it, okay? A lot of people say he. Why would God have a gender? This isn't something that needs to have sex. This is a creator being. Why the fuck would it have a gender, a sex? God isn't a he, it's not a she, it's an it. It might even be a they, them. In the one instance in which those pronouns actually make sense. It's an unknowable being, but it's not something that reproduces sexually. And if it does, well, the monotheists are wrong. And that means it's more likely to be an animal as well, and not some big epic being, but more like some Lovecraftian horror that we just don't understand. And if that's the case, then why the fuck would it care about us? One speck in the unknowable size of all existence. You know, this is the kind of thing that it falls apart. It falls apart. Even if you believe that this is real, like some being, some entity is real, it very quickly falls apart. Even if it does exist. Why would you worship it? How do you know that your interpretation is true? The closest I get to having, like, genuine respect for people who do believe in a deity are ones that go beyond Christianity or any of the others, right? And they just say, look, I believe that some force out there started this. They don't claim that it's a sentient force. They don't claim that it has a plan or that there's an afterlife or anything like that. They simply claim that some kind of force did this in some kind of, how can I put it? They don't humanize it too much, is what I'm saying. They don't humanize it. They don't add a lot of laws and doctrine to it. They simply say, this was probably... And even then, that is just basically me saying that is the most palatable version of this nonsense, right? So the God of the Gaps. The other one was complexity. There's so much complexity in nature, and there are so many patterns in nature. Great example, you might be able to see Uzumaki back there. The spiral. The spiral is one of the most ubiquitous patterns in nature. You find that shit everywhere. Guess that means it was created. That was the building blocks. The base NPC character that God used before it added the customizations. No. Fact is that we live in the real world, right? Evolution is a thing. We can see it on a small level with certain animals. Adaptations happening all the time, and over time those adaptations can change quite well. We see it in humanity to a certain extent, right? Where people who live in different climates have different resistances. They have different biological histories. Ultimately, when you go back, we're all the same. Like, we all have the same origin, because we're the same. There aren't different breeds of humans, but there are different adaptations of humans. it's very common for some people to be lactose intolerant because really, adults shouldn't really be drinking milk. That is something us crazy Westerners did, or Europeans did. That's what we did. But in a lot of countries, they're lactose intolerant because we're not really supposed to have a tolerance for milk past a certain age. Things like that. You know, some cultures deal with the cold better. Some cultures deal with the heat better because we're all from different, like, ecological environments with different resources and different, like, you know, environments and cultures and all this kind of thing. And over time, this doesn't just have an effect on our mind, it has an effect on our body. Black people, for example, have denser bones. I don't know why, but they do. They're also at greater risk for a lot of different diseases. White people, we burn easier. Our skin is not as repellent to the sun. Could it be because black people tend to be in much warmer climates historically? Things like that. We have adaptations. Is this evolution specifically? No, but it's the stepping stones towards that. Evolution really only happens because it needs to. It is the point in which, after so much adaptation, something changes over time. That's why we still have tailbones. We don't have tails anymore. We're apes. A lot of apes don't have tails. But we still have the area in which the tail could grow from. That's something we don't need anymore. You can see it to a mild extent in breeding. What is domestication syndrome? As to the best of my ability, the way this works is there's a specific gene that is reduced during breeding. This gene controls skin pigmentation and the cartilage within the ears, tails, and snout. It also controls a defensive response. It's what keeps wild animals alive, right? It's the thing that makes them aggressive or run away. It's something it's the reason why domesticated animals do not last long in the wild. Because of this. They're, on a genetic level, not suited for it. They're easy pickings. This is why a lot of domesticated animals have curly tails, floppy ears, shorter snouts, and lighter skin pigmentations, because they have less of that gene. This isn't evolution, this is breeding. But the difference between breeding and evolution is the environment, it's natural selection. It is nature saying, this is what's effective, so this is what's going to survive. Versus specific breeding is what is humans going, this is what I want, so this is what's going to continue breeding down the line, right? It's the difference. Eugenics, not really a hard science at all, but that comes from the same basic principle. It's breeding, but specifically in humans, which tends to be a lot harder. And that's the case for other animals as well. Certain animals are impossible to domesticate or breed properly because they just have a natural resistances. I think moose and zebras are two animals that humans have tried to domesticate before, and it just will not work with them for whatever reason. But essentially, you'll notice, what do moose, zebras, dogs, fuck us, have in common? We have 4 limbs. 4 limbs is pretty much what you need in most cases. Now, when you get onto the lower, kind of like insectoid end, you're going to have more legs. Why? I don't know. I'm not a biologist. But you don't really tend to see an animal, a big, mammalian type animal, with legs like a spider or a millipede for some reason. Probably because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy to keep all these things going. I don't know if you've ever reared plants, But one of the most common things you do when rearing plants is deadheading them. When the flowers are dying off, you pull them off. Because whilst that flower is still there, it's receiving energy. But that energy is not doing anything. It's receiving nutrients. But that nutrients isn't doing anything because it's dead. So if you deadhead the flower, you remove the dead parts. That nutrients, instead of going to go, it can't go to that flower anymore because it's not there. So it's going to go elsewhere. And removing the dead parts of the plant makes the plant flourish because more nutrients, more energy from general plant behavior, growingness, I'm not a biologist, is going elsewhere in places that make more sense. So why would you have about 8 fucking limbs when you don't need them? You'll also find this in certain mollusks like octopus or octopi or squid and things like that. They're aquatic, so maybe that helps them swim better. I don't know. I'm not a biologist. But essentially, things are evolved in ways that make sense. And occasionally, when you look at nature, you'll see something that really stands out. And the reason why it stands out is because it's not the fucking norm. The kiwi, for example, that's not the norm. That's why the kiwi really stands out. Although the kiwi is probably one of the closest birds we have to a dinosaur in terms of like, have you heard that thing fucking roar? It roars like a fucking, like Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's awesome. But kiwis are honestly more like rodents than they're like birds. But again, evolution. Birds didn't just exist. Birds were dinosaurs. I think humans' oldest ancestor looks like some kind of fish, if we go back in line. But when people hear this, they think, oh, do I look like a fish? No, because that was millennia ago. Just like we're not humans on chimpanzees. We're not gorillas. We evolved from the same background. They are cousins more than they are evolution. Like, more than they are ancestors. We share a common ancestor. Because not everything is going to try to survive in the same way. For some of the same animal, one strategy might work. But if they're in a different environment, another strategy is going to work. So they're going to evolve different strategies because different strategies in different environments are going to work. So even if we have the same common ancestor, you plop that ancestor in different environments and they're going to need to do different things in order to survive. Which is why, over time, they look different. But because we have the same common ancestor, we look a lot alike. You look at chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, humans. We move the same way in a lot of ways. Our expressions are similar. They might mean different things. A smile to us is a friendly greeting. A smile to a chimp is a fucking threat. But that's just different social elements evolving. But again, like, you give a chimpanzee or a gorilla an item, and you give like a human being an item, and they're not familiar with that item, and watch how they behave and figure this item out in the exact same kind of way. They move the same way. We look at it the same way. We are all apes. A lot of people, a lot of human beings are not comfortable with that because we think we're so much beyond. And we are. The biggest thing that separates humans from other animals, and especially in the ape group, is we have been blessed and fucking cursed with the ability to think about stuff way more than other animals. We can be introspective. We can think about things far beyond us, like what we're discussing right now. The concept of religion is an intelligent mind trying to figure shit out. The scientific process is an intelligent mind not only trying to figure stuff out, but seeing, like, putting it to the test, repeating that test, seeing if they get the same results, putting it in different situations and see how those results differ. It's testing. Other animals do this. Other incredibly intelligent animals do this. Corvids, magpies, ravens, crows, incredibly intelligent animals. Octopus, incredibly intelligent animals. Some animals are just gifted with intelligence and they can figure shit out. There's a reasonable kind of like theory that some people have had that if we weren't here to basically stop any other animal from evolving to a certain point, if humans weren't here, there would be a massive gap. Humans are like the most destructive animal on the planet. If we were gone, something else would eventually take our place. Now, we're a freak of nature. Nothing was really like if there was a grand design, humans wouldn't be it. Humans wouldn't. Everything would be in balance. Humanity would not be allowed to get to where we are. We are so above the food chain, our biggest threat to our existence is ourselves. Which is something you see happen whenever a lot of other animals just break out of balance. Nature is a delicate balance. And we have broken through that. If there was a god, surely a god wouldn't allow that to happen. Because a god would care about the balance of its creation. But again, like, human beings put themselves on the top of the pedestal. You know, we're gifted. We are gifted beyond any other animal with the ability to think and process and understand way more than any other. There are some intelligent animals out there, but their intelligence is still like even the most intelligent animal, their intelligence, as far as we can understand, is that of the level of like a young child, which is intelligent. But again, not compared to an adult human. We are special. We are unique. We have broken out of any niche. We do not belong in a niche. We are dominant. We are undefeated. Human beings are extremely powerful compared to every other thing. So I can understand people thinking we're different. We're like, so we are different, but we're above. We're better. We're more important. We are to us because we recognize human beings as being the same animal. So a lot of people will instinctively put human beings above other animals because, again, we're intelligent. We can recognize human beings being the same. Thus, survival instincts kick in. Tribal nature kicks in. Again, this is something you can see in other animals as they try to protect each other. In elephants, incredibly intelligent animals, they will try and help each other out. You know, like, I'm pretty sure if elephants could understand and communicate like we could, they would put elephants on the top of the totem pole. Because they are elephants. So, of course, monkey brain, ape brain, bringing in survival. We are going to put ourselves on the top of the thing. Even the fact that we think this way is because we're animals. A lot of what we do is just animals being animals. Chimpanzees go to war. They go to war, they feud over environments, they beat each other, they mutilate each other, they violate each other. They exploit their environment. I've watched corvids do this a lot. Corvids will exploit their intelligent animals, and a lot of people hate them. A lot of people hate crows and ravens and magpies because they're a nuisance. Why are they a nuisance? Because they're intelligent. They learn how to exploit their environment to get the most out of it. Just like we do. Animals being animals. This doesn't mean that a god created it because we see patterns. Certain patterns are just more successful, which is why they see them all the time. On top of that, because of evolution, a lot of life has a similar base that diversity has sprung from. As you go back through the trees, things get less and less diverse. Because not only has environments well, animals change, but in the environments they're in have got wider and more different and more diverse. So other niches have popped up. Successful animals have sprung into different corners. It's brilliant. It's fascinating. But this is not something the average person sees. This, by the way, is what makes finding life on Mars, in terms of, like, bacteria, so fucking exciting. Because we could see, if human beings are alive long enough, we could see not as an individuals, it's impossible to see as an individual, but through collective information over time, we could see evolution actually happening. It's possible. Because Mars is where Earth was millennia ago. That's exciting. I'm never going to see it. You're never going to see it. Your children's children's are never going to see it. But if human beings live that long, some of us in the future are going to be able to say, here, look, this is the history of us monitoring the life on this planet and watching it grow and evolve. If we don't choose to exploit it first and ruin any chance of that happening, which is probably what we're going to do. Now, let's get on to faith. I talked about faith. Here's where the Christian or religious belief is understandable. It comes down to priorities. It comes down to how your brain works and what you as an individual need, right? What I mean by that is the religious belief is understandable for a few reasons. Throughout human history, we have relied on magic to explain what we can't explain. Like I said, thinking of religion and mythology is an intelligent brain trying to figure out the world. Which is why we see similar stories appear, or similar kind of creations appear throughout culture. They may mean different things throughout different cultures, dragons being a great example of that. Western dragons are very different in not just how they're depicted, but how they are treated in mythology. The kind of creatures they are in terms of attitude and what they will do compared to Eastern dragons. Eastern dragons tend to be more peaceful, wise, the kind of thing you would have reverence for. But Eastern religion tends to be very nature focused, so that makes sense. Whereas Western religion is very Judeo-Christian for the most part. So anything that is a threat to us, we demonize. Sometimes quite literally. Dragons are sometimes depicted as demons or devils or emissaries of Satan and shit like that. Different culture, different ways of viewing things, different dominating ideas. But dragons appear in a multitude of cultures. In some cultures, the dragons themselves are the gods. Quetzalcoatl. Okay, these may not all be dragons, but they're all mighty reptiles that exist even in countries that don't have native lizards, which is weird. We've all come up with this one idea that can be seen throughout. Another one that's really common is were creatures, werewolves, skinwalkers, human beings becoming animals. Why do you think that would happen exactly? Human beings going wild and feral, them losing what makes them human. Scary thought, isn't it? So is death. Ghosts appear in every culture. Zombies, vampires, something of that ilk appears in every culture. Again, they're a little bit different. The Hopi Japanese vampires, I think they're Japanese, they might be Chinese, correct me. The Hopi Japanese vampires are very, very different from the Western vampires. But again, they're the same kind of entity. They're the same kind of thing. Because human beings, no matter what the culture we're in, we have the same fears, the same worries, the same kind of thoughts. Ultimately, we fear death. We fear not what we don't know. And that's where all this kind of stuff springs from. some of it isn't necessarily an explanation for what we don't know, but a way of processing an idea. So we may not have actually believed that vampires are a real thing, although I believe historically people did. But it might have actually been an allegory that multiple cultures really landed on for a common kind of human belief. Look in the modern age at how much we use robots and AI to examine what makes us human. That's a very modern frame of it. But I'm pretty sure historically we would look at animals and things. Because it doesn't matter what culture you're from, we're all just animals. And animals gifted with the ability to see and understand itself and the world, and run upon to understand their own mortality, to understand their own impact, that is a blessing and a curse. Because there's a lot of things in this world we do not know and will probably never know. And that makes us highly uncomfortable. So we need an explanation. So we think of one. Even if it doesn't necessarily become myth or religion, it might be an allegory that pops up time and time and time and time again in different cultures. So something being complex doesn't mean it has a creator. That's just the result of what is going to survive. Right? And something being commonplace, such as religion, doesn't really give it any more credence either, because we're all human and we've all got the same core worries and thoughts and, insecurities around different things. So we're gonna come up with the same kind of ideas around these things. They may be shaped by our culture a little bit, but the core is always going to remain the same. So again, the god of complexity, the god of patterns, not much of an argument either. And the one I've just got up there, the god of repetitive beliefs, not much of a thing either. I think the only reason we really give God much credit whatsoever is because of that repetition. Belief, religion, deities, they're prevalent throughout pretty much every human culture, or every culture. Every culture. And a lot of the same themes pop up time and time and time and time and time and time again. Because again, it all springs from that same core. So, I don't think there is a God. And I believe the only reason we give it any credit whatsoever is due to just how prevalent it is. Not just historically, but in our very language. I'm English. Chances are if you're watching this, you speak English, right? You understand English. Do you realize just how many words that we use on a day-to-day basis originate from religion? They have religious context. Because of just how much Christianity dominated our history, how much Christianity had a stranglehold on the entire outlook of the various cultures in this area of regions for generations, for hundreds of years. That's why we give it more credit. Because it's just normal. Belief nowadays in a god may not be normal, but the idea of the belief is normal. Now, you look at both the faithful and atheists and how they respond to people who believe in aliens, in ghosts, in various cryptids of all kinds, like the Jersey Devil, the Skunk Ape, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, God, what else is there? There's a cornucopia of these fucking things. The Mothman. People laugh because it's absurd. Yet, a cryptid, an animal that is vaguely human, existing out there, and we've never really found it or seen it or proved that it exists or doesn't exist or not. that is far more likely to exist than a grand creator that did everything and is in control of everything that happens and is a guiding hand all the time. And then when we die, they have like this little pocket dimension somewhere that our souls go to, whatever that is. That's far more likely. But it's not as prevalent in our culture and our history and our upbringing as religion is. And when it is, it's in a form of mockery. Now that is changing these days with religion. But I think what people are not failing to realize with how we view modern day religion, like Christianity, specifically Christianity, because that's the one you're allowed to insult, we still have that mentality. We just apply it to different things these days. A lot of the way people... This is a religious argument I'm coming into now, but a lot of the way people treat science is the exact same reason people treat God. People, the way they think about science, the way they talk about science, they don't talk about it in terms of a process, a methodology. They talk about it and think about it in terms of fact, reality. They trust in science just as religious trust in Jesus and trusts in God. If a person with authority in science tells them something, they believe it. Doesn't matter if it is a skewed bit of information. It doesn't matter if this is something that somebody has got from a scientific journal and not really understood it and then twisted it to their own agenda. It doesn't matter. Because science said it, thus it's true. There's a lot of people that think like that. And that is equally as ridiculous and damaging as people that just believe whatever the fuck the Bible says, or the Quran, or whatever other holy book or holy leader you can think of that says something. It's essentially an argument from authority. But this gets into something else. How much can the individual truly know? Think about everything you know. How do you know? Do you know because you've experienced it? Do you know because you've tested it? Or do you know because you've read about it? You've been told about it. You've been told numerous times that it's true. Because there ain't much outside of needing water and food to survive, needing sleep, wind existing because you can feel it, gravity existing because we feel it all the time. Things like that. There aren't much outside of what you can physically experience that you can really know. Like, science may tell us that a lot of things kind of work in a specific way, but how many of us really have the understanding and the facilities to understand and test this ourselves? Basically none of us, outside of people already in that field, or extreme enthusiasts. So ultimately, we do take a lot of science on faith. Everything that I've been talking about today, about evolution. Have I tested this? No. I've got some correlations in being an enthusiast when it comes to nature and observing different animals, observing animals and humans and connecting patterns and things. But everything I've just said, not just about fucking evolution, but culture and history, I've not experienced this firsthand. I've been told this. This all could be bullshit. I don't know. But that's what separates someone like me from a hardline fucking religious person. They claim to know. It's God. And my argument is, you don't. I don't. I have seen more things in my own life that make sense of a lot of what science says, but ultimately I don't know. What have you seen that proves God? Really proves it. Patterns exist. Great. They do in science as well. And they have a reason behind them, beyond God created it. Like, we don't know, thus God. No, we just don't know. And there's a lot we just don't know. And it gets to the point where you either have to admit that you believe in a fantasy that you can never prove, or you have to admit that you don't know. Like, I'm an atheist because I do not believe there is a God. I think the whole idea is absurd. But my attitude towards a lot of this, if I'm being intellectually honest, is agnostic. Because we don't know. I don't know that there is a God. I don't know that there isn't a God. But I'm not going to claim that there is one to fill in the gaps of understanding just because it's an idea that exists. If it's God, then again, why isn't it a happy ball of gas? Why isn't it a giant turtle? Why isn't it a tiny little werewolf? Or an immortal vampire? Why isn't it a Lovecraftian horror that we can't possibly comprehend? That would make more sense than God, because we can't comprehend it. Just like we can't comprehend a lot of the real world when it comes to astronomy. Because as soon as you look into space, like I've said, that shit gets fucky fast. That shit gets really fucky. And if you're the kind of person that likes to know, and likes to feel like they know, and really wants an explanation for everything, and gets really uncomfortable with uncertainties, stay away from astronomy, because holy shit, astrology is probably more your thing. But again, not necessarily. That's more of the fateful stuff. But this stuff is fun. I enjoy this kind of mental masturbation. I think it's fun. Believe what you want. Look, I have been raised in a family that has a weird mixture of Christian, spiritualist, and atheist, right? I've not been raised in a single belief system environment. And whilst my mother was religious, and a lot of the family members that I interacted with were Christian, like my mother, I was left to make my own mind up. And throughout my entire life, I have been atheist. I have never seen any reason to believe in any of this stuff. And the only time I really ever started to develop a bad taste towards Christianity is after I developed experience with a lot of Christians that use their faith to be fucking monsters, or just shitheads. Which, to be honest, so do atheists. There's a lot of atheists out there that say that, like, basically act as if they're the most intelligent person in the room, because the idea of believing in a god is so fucking stupid. Only a plebeian would believe in such a thing. Fuck off. Meanwhile, as well as certain atheists that have no concept in the sanctity of life, because they are so fucking Spock-brained, they are so logic, that they become illogical. They're robotic. They're not human. You know what I mean? They exist. They're nowhere near as prevalent as the fucking, like, patronizing, pretentious atheists that believe they're the most intelligent person in any room where they're full of religious people. Fucking bullshit. There are plenty of intelligent religious people. Their priorities, where their brain initially goes, they're just different from mine. Because that's where it boils down to. Psychological priorities. What foundation is more important to you? And me, I don't like believing in shit of which I can't prove. Some people are okay with that, so long as it makes them feel good, or if it's a more positive or helpful outlook. And for some people, that's the case. Some people need faith, because if they didn't have faith, they're not going to end up in a good place. Not everyone's the same. As I've said, I don't like religion. I get wary around certain religious types. If you believe in God and I get on with you, it's probably because you have a certain attitude about yourself that is more grounded. And I'll share something with you that I've hinted at for a while. Over the past few years, I have started to become more spiritual. I do enjoy astrology. I have certain gemstones around the house. I have a amethyst and a howlite by the bed to help me sleep. I have clear quartz to help charge up certain fucking other stones. I have fucking sage in the house, and so on and so forth. I find the idea of it helpful and comforting. The difference is, I'm going to, if you ask me what I actually believe, I'm going to tell you that it's bullshit. I like the symbolism of a lot of pagan, Wicca, whatever the fuck you want to call it, New Age spirituality. I've always been someone that has loved nature, has been fascinated with nature, and I would if I'm going to have a faith, I'm going to be far more comfortable with attaching meaning to minerals and flowers and, herbs and certain times of the year and things that just come from nature. So if I have a certain bracelet that I wear as a constant reminder to not overspend, which I forget which one does that. It's like the purple green one that's supposed to help you with financial decisions. I know that's what it represents. So if I wear it and I look at it, such as when I'm picking up my phone or I'm picking up my wallet to buy something, there it is. There's the reminder. Stop wasting your money on shit you don't need. Nothing magical is actually happening, but the symbolism is helping. Howlite, it's my favorite stone. It's an anti-anxiety stone. It's a stone to help with, general social, emotional stability. There's Snowflake Obsidian, which is an outright full-on depression stone, to help with that. There's so many of these, and I have a variety of these bracelets, and if you know what these mean, and I wear certain ones, you have an idea of what's been on my mind that day. Which I kind of like, because I like shit like that. I like wearing stuff that I'm not blatantly just telling you something, but if you understand, you know me a little bit. And I like that we have this non-verbal understanding and a shared interest. That appeals to me. But do I actually believe that the solar system, the planets, have any impact on reality? No. Do I actually believe that wearing Snowflake Obsidian will reduce my chances of depression? Or that wearing, I forget the name of it, blue something will improve my social skills? Or that wearing citrine will just in general give me a brighter mood and give me more positive energy? No. But what they are is a grounding device to remind myself to have a specific mentality. And that's helpful. And I've always been someone that's been attracted to nature magic, to animal symbolism, to all this kind of thing. You see me in video games, and like every video game that has like fantasy, I'm religious. I will believe in some kind of nature deity or a hunt deity or something like that. In every video game that's fantasy and has deities, I am never an atheist in a fantasy video game because it's fantasy, so gods are real. In this setting, it's demons, gods, dragons, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, treants, druids that transform into birds, like all this kind of shit. That's real in this world. And I like the idea of spirits of nature that you can, like, help each other out, and they put you in a better mood. They help out your garden. They help out around the house. They help your mentality. They help the general vibe around you and shit. I like that. Just like I imagine a lot of religious people like the concept of God. The difference is, when it comes down to it, I'm going to tell you, yeah, it's bullshit. But it's bullshit that makes me happy. So I'm going to indulge in it. But I am never going to tell you that it's fact. I'm never going to tell you that it's fact. I'm never going to tell you that it's real and all of this stuff does have this effect. I've had moments with astrology in which I've listened to it. I've listened to the cosmic weather, essentially. And yeah, it's actually lined up perfectly. And because I've planned my week around that cosmic broadcast, that cosmic kind of like weather report, things have gone well. I've also had moments where that hasn't happened, so there's my brain picking and choosing what to believe, you know? So I think when it comes to astrology, it's mind over matter. And your mental well-being, having a direction, it doesn't matter where it comes from, even if it's God, it's helpful to some people. To some people, not everyone, to some people. Meaning, guess what? I'm human. Yeah, I'm human. And I take comfort in some bullshit. Just like every other human out there, including atheists, by the way. Other atheists like myself. You will believe in something that is bullshit. I don't think... There are obviously people out there that are purely physical world. I'm willing to bet that the majority of them are doomer nihilists. Because the religious people are right about one thing. When you do not have some kind of safety net, some type of comfort blanket, when you don't have faith in something, you realize just how chaotic the world is. How kind of shitty the world is. Nothing has any intrinsic meaning at all. Nothing has any intrinsic meaning. We're just a bunch of animals stuck on a rock, fighting between one another, destroying shit, fucking, reproducing, eating, sleeping until we die. And when we're gone, it doesn't matter. The universe is probably going to cheer when human beings die. Not really, because it's not sentient. But you know what I mean, because things are going to get back in balance after we have a bunch of power plants exploding and a bunch of the fucking Earth going crazy. But eventually things will heal. But it doesn't matter. None of this matters. That's nihilism. But it's to me, it's true. I teeter on nihilism every now and again because ultimately the nihilistic outlook is true. It is true. There is no intrinsic meaning to anything. There is more than likely no gods or anything like that. It is just, we're here for no purpose. We simply are. We're highly evolved animals that have been cursed with the ability to understand that our situation is a chaotic fucking mess where mostly negative shit happens. Because guess what? That's what nature is. Nature is chaos, but it's a balanced chaos because things very rarely like survive or become like powerful enough in order to break through that balance. And when they do, it causes problems. That entire balance gets skewed and then everything within that ecosystem fucking dies off or starts to fail because everything's connected to everything. Everything relies on other things, right? So that balance is very important, but it's a chaotic balance. It's a delicate balance. Nihilism is an outlook that I believe makes sense, logically. But the human brain can't survive that way. It can't. If you are not only nihilistic, but that's the only framework you work on, you're not going to be a happy person. You're not, because it's not a positive outlook. This is why I'm an absurdist. Absurdist is a nihilist. Essentially, an absurdist is a nihilist that recognizes the human condition. Nihilism is correct, as far as I'm concerned, but not helpful. Because sometimes, just because something is true, doesn't mean it's helpful to believe. It's not helpful, because it fundamentally is antagonistic to the human condition. We need purpose. We need meaning. We need to have a reason to get up the next day. We need to have a reason to fight for things. This is why people push families or religion or, you know, community or something, because that is a very easy way to have something to fight for, to have something to get up for the next morning. Now, I don't want kids. Kids are hell to me. This doesn't work for everyone, which is why the people that push, if you don't have kids, then you're going to be depressed. It's like, their logic is sound for them. And for most people, because most people want kids. But for those of us that don't want kids, their logic is sound in terms of the core of it. If you do not have a purpose, if you do not have a reason to fight, to get up the next morning, to live your life, you are going to be depressed. You are going to wonder what the hell why you're even here. The core of it's true, because it ultimately boils down to you need a purpose. Human beings need a purpose. They need a purpose, they need reason, they need something. And nihilism basically tells them that none of that exists. Absurdism says none of that none of that fundamentally exists. Intrinsically exists. Fuck me, I can't speak. But you have to find it yourself. Because if you don't, you're fucked. You have to find your own purpose. You have to find your own meaning. You know, that's what it boils down to. Does this mean that God is real? No. But it means that people do need something to believe in. They do need something to have faith in. And because it's the most prevalent thing, for a lot of people, that's religion. Some people have replaced religion with science, in that they don't believe in science as a process. They believe in it in terms of fact. Ironically, people who have faith in science are not very scientific, because they just believe everything that is said in the name of science. They don't question any of it, which completely goes against the spirit of the scientific method. But those people exist. Because, again, we're all human, and for as smug as certain atheists act, they have that same brain. It might function differently, it might, process things in a different way, have different priorities that it gravitates towards, but it's a human brain. So it, at its core, needs certain things in order to healthily function. And that's where a lot of this argument kind of falls apart, because that's it. The atheist cannot prove that God doesn't exist, which is an absurd thing to say, but yeah, the religious person cannot prove that God does exist. And someone like me will say the only reason you believe that God exists in the first place is because it's a really old kind of cultural way of coping with being human and the human condition. You know, I don't think God is real. I think the whole concept is ridiculous, but the desire for it to be real is very, very human. And contrary to what, again, a lot of atheists will say, faith is essentially a stepping stone in human intelligence. It's us trying to explain things, trying to make sense of things, without any kind of other foundation to build from. And if you step back and you analyze what you believe in, do it like I urge you. Sit back at one point and think, okay, what do I know? Actually know. Not what I've been told, but what I've experienced. What I know is true for a fact. You could probably fit that on your hands. Very small list of things. And then you can go with that in its logical progression. You can understand why the religious have their belief. And there's probably, if you're honest with yourself, a belief you have that is equally kind of absurd. But it doesn't matter how much you try and logic your way around it. You believe in it because it fulfills that need you have as a human being. That need for purpose, for meaning, for explanation that we all have. I think some people, most people, don't even think about it. This is something they don't think. They just instinctively land on something. And depending on what their culture is, what their upbringing is, what their environment is, what they're going to land on is probably what the majority of people around them are going to land on. Because they don't think about it. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, because that's most people. I'm not saying you're dumbass for not thinking about it. Like, they just don't think about it. So, they just default to something. That's more than likely the most common thing in their environment. You know, and that serves its purpose. There's a reason why thinking people, intelligent people, are often more depressed. The whole saying, ignorance is bliss. Because inevitably they're going to go down this rabbit hole. And it's a rabbit hole that leads to nihilism. And then at that point, you're going to have to cope by jumping into some kind of faith, or you're going to end up on absurdism, which is in itself, it's not really a faith, it's more of an explanation, where it's like, absurdism isn't a faith, because faith is like, okay, it's this. Absurdism is kind of basically saying, yeah, nihilism's right, but that's not going to fucking help you. So, you're going to have to figure out something for yourself. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not, you're going to have to figure... It's like, I'd say it's the most self-aware outlook. Which, I know I'm pretentious for saying that, because of course I'm going to say that. That's the outlook I have. But I'm not comfortable going whole hog into New Age. Just like I'm not going whole hog into, like, full faith with science, or one of the religions, or something like that. So, to me, recognizing that this is part of being human and figuring out my way around that does make more sense. It's something I'm more comfortable with kind of landing on. Because it's like, it feels more realistic to me. You know? But this was over an hour long of just fucking my brain going bleh. I've not done this for a while. This has been fun. Anyway, I'm going to go and probably have a fucking drink. Play some video games. Have some fun. But yeah, I'm hoping you enjoyed this. If you listened to this whole thing, thank you very much. What are your thoughts? You know, I've recently been reading a book I've wanted to read for quite some time called Surrounded by Idiots. And it's been lent to me by someone I know. And, it's really put me into this mentality where I'm hyper aware more than I already was about how people's brains operate on a fundamental different level. Like, our priorities are just completely different. And if our priorities are completely different, we can have a conversation in which what that other person is hearing, what I'm saying and what you're hearing are completely different things. Because we're processing it in a different way. So, we process you are processing what I'm saying through your own head. You're filtering it through your own perspectives, and then you're giving something back. But if you don't have the same understanding and the same perspectives that I have, then you're not necessarily gonna get the same kind of result that I'm getting, and vice versa. You're going to say something to me, I'm going to process it through my own head, my understanding, and I'm just going to be left with a blank. And I'm going to end up coming out with my own thing of it. This is why communication can be so fucking difficult, because people, while we have the same kind of core animalistic, you know, things, our brain has different priorities, it functions in different ways, autistic or not, this affects everyone. And it means that you can have, like, completely different outlooks. A conversation about completely different things, where people are saying one thing and the other person are hearing another thing. And it's been... I love Myers-Briggs systems. I love, like, the you know, INFJ stuff, Enneagram stuff, all this kind of thing. I love these systems. I think they're fascinating. And I do have faith in them, because I have seen, I can correlate patterns with these things. And I'll tell you, this is something I've said to other people. I'm an INFJ in the Myers-Briggs system. Myers-Briggs, but however you say it. And I'll tell you, I have never seen anyone with talk like me and move like me except INFJs. Holy shit, do I feel validated when I go on YouTube and I look at INFJs and I listen to their mental kind of like tsunami come out, like I'm doing right now, and I'm going, holy shit, they're me! They're me! What the fuck? I have never seen anyone talk like that, move like that, like I'm doing right now. Like, I've never seen that. Except in me and INFJs that I've listened to online. Even if we have vastly different outlooks, because it's not about, these personality things aren't about opinions, they're about our personality, our mentality, right? INFJs, if, like, seriously, if you've never looked into this before, look up INFJs and see how many of them talk very similar, think very similar, do similar things with their eyes, move similar ways. It's kind of crazy. And they can't all be autistic, although it is kind of common. I've read for INFJs to be autistic, which is interesting. But again, that, to me, that adds more credence to it. It's also pretty common for autistic people to be demisexual, which is something I found out about. There's, even if get 5 autistic people in the room, completely different people, there's still going to be some correlations, because the autism affects our brain. It makes our brains work in a different way, and because it's not neurotypical, there's going to be some correlations there. So I think it's interesting. I think it's really, really interesting. I like the Myers-Briggs systems. I like shit like this. And really, it's kind of kickstarted the brain recently, where it's made me really think about how people think on a fundamentally different level. They have completely different perspectives. And none of these are wrong, by the way. I'm not inherently right. I'm not inherently wrong in the way I think, the way I process things. The same thing for you watching this right now. It's, if we have different processes, we just have different processes. We may come to the same conclusion for different reasons. We may come to completely different conclusions. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm just very aware of that currently, and it's something that's in, like, the forefront of my mind all the time. Every single time I'm having a discussion with anyone, I'm very aware of it, and it's affected how I'm behaving. In a good way, I'd say. Like, I still use Twitter as a way to shitpost and say offensive stuff and just basically connect with the culture of Twitter of being the absolute worst place on the internet to get any form of reason whatsoever, because Twitter is the place where you go to get the worst take on literally everything. But I still use Twitter as kind of like a stress ball, where I go on there and I make snarky comments and shit like that. Occasionally I'll get into a discussion like what sparked this, but I mostly use it as a kind of like stress ball. Twitter's not a place to really take seriously. It's full of crazy people, including me. I've said this before, but this is me. This is me. I don't put on a character or anything like that. You know, people who know me in real life know that I'm exactly the same. And I don't fake, I don't bullshit, I don't virtue signal, I do none of this. You're gonna get the same me wherever you go. Except on Twitter. On Twitter, I'm just a fucking asshole. I'm just a fucking asshole on Twitter. But anyway, this is becoming extremely rambly, more than before. I hope you've enjoyed this yet again. I've really enjoyed recording this. I have not done one of these in fucking ages, and I just felt like I needed it. My brain's been activated again recently, and instead of just going through the motions and doing the day-to-day stuff, I've actually been thinking about stuff again, and I'll tell you, one last thing before I leave. There's a group I follow on Facebook that just posts negative, depressing shit all the time. And quite often, I will read this shit and I either think, come on, that's fucking nonsense. Or I'll think, that's true. But why would you focus on that? And if there's anything that I think suggests growth in me, it's that. Like, I do have downers. I still have depressive moments. I still have downers. It typically correlates with how much autistic burnout I have, which is something I'm very aware of at the moment. I try to balance my social battery a lot. This week has been quite hectic, which is why I'm probably a bit manic right now. It's been a bit hectic. But I've been trying to balance my social battery, because as my social battery runs out, which can run out in numerous ways. It's not even a social battery, it's just a life battery, right? Like, for example, it's warm right now, it's hot. That affects me. That drains me. Now, rainy, cold weather, that invigorates me. I love cold weather. I've been rocking in cold weather where it's been raining like crazy, and I have felt so alive. And I've just gone to walk up the road when the sun's been out, and I felt like shit by the end of it, you know? Little things like that. I'm autistic, I'm hypersensitive to certain sensations, and the more of these I have to deal with, the more I have to mask, the more I have to basically withhold myself and suppress myself in day-to-day life, the more draining that's going to be. And eventually, the more I do this, the more likely I am to crash, the more likely I am to be argumentative or short or something like that. So I don't want to be like that, so I try and manage it the best I can. And one thing I have noticed is, despite the fact that I still have depressive episodes, low episodes, shit like that, my general mentality is way better these days. Because I still enjoy negative shit. I still enjoy depressive shit. I'm one of these people that goes, I'm not nihilistic, I'm a realist. As I point to something really fucking depressing. I am one of those people, if I'm being entirely honest. I don't know a few people like that. I do hate that, by the way, how realism essentially boils down to fucking depressing and awful every time. Which just shows, like, because of how prevalent that is, that just shows, like, a collective negativity throughout humanity. It's really funny. But no, like, this group posting negative shit all the time, where I'm not quite connecting with it, like any of it, outside of maybe one or two, I think it really does showcase an improved mentality that I've developed in recent years, which is something I've got to keep in mind. Like, typically speaking, when I'm having a low or depressive episode, it's not because I'm suffering with depression or shit's really going bad or I'm useless or anything else that I might tell myself. It's literally just because I'm running out of battery and I need to recharge. And the way I recharge is kind of like what I'm doing right now. I am spending time alone without any sounds around me from the outside world. I can't hear people screaming and shouting. I can't hear kids kicking a football consistently all fucking day. It's actually quiet. The only thing I can hear right now is myself and the computer humming. It's really nice. I'm alone. I'm relaxing. There's nothing consistently stimulating me all the fucking time and, like, pulling me in all different directions. I'm just relaxing, I'm doing my own thing, and I'm disconnecting. So, see, unlike your phone, where you need to connect your phone to charge it, I need to disconnect in order to charge. And then when I get a few hours of this, ideally a day, or mostly a day, like I'm getting today, I've had like 3 hours of this now, it's beautiful. I feel better. My mood elevates. And I need more of it depending. Like in summer, I need more of this because, again, heat, it's a consistent stressor, right? I need less of it in like the winter and the autumn because that mood, that weather is a consistent booster. Things like that, right? And I'm becoming more aware of how my brain works and how I'm functioning. I'm noting more patterns in not just nutrition, not just what I eat and how that affects my mood and my energy, but certain little things. And the more I know, the more I can cater my environment to the best of my ability to really put myself in a better place and manage the inherent extra hurdle I have in life, which is autism. It's an inherent extra hurdle I have. But I've got to manage it as best as I can. I'm never going to be like everyone else. I think I'm always going to be a bit of a fucking loser, but I'm just going to manage it the best I can. I'm a hell of a lot less of a loser now than I was a few years ago. And every single time I see a picture of myself or an old video of myself from back then and how different I was in a negative way, that's a booster. Like, I can sit here and shit all over my past self, and a lot of people going, wow, you're being really negative. Like, no, I'm being fucking positive. I was a consistently angry fat fuck. And now I'm still kind of fat. I'm still kind of angry, but at least I process it better. I'm joking. I've gained weight past few years. My standard was 12 stone, 11 stone. It's now 14 stone, 15 stone. I've gained weight. I am insecure about it. I am frightened about continuing to gain, but I'm nowhere near like the 24, 25 stone that I used to be. And that is something I need to keep reminding myself of, and that helps me, you know. I've got a problem with food, you know. I eat my feelings. So I'm just gonna have to process that better. But anyway, I'm rambling way more now for the third and final fucking time. Bye.